She thought the crumbling marble quarry was her family's final insult, a $850 death trap she couldn't afford to maintain while living in a motel room with her pregnant teenage daughter. But when desperation drove her to explore the flooded lower chambers, she discovered a vein that geologists said couldn't exist, and what that impossible stone concealed would transform her from the woman everyone pitied into the guardian of something that would change their small mountain town forever. Before we dive into this incredible journey, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind.
If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today.
The March rain hammered against the cracked window of room 114 at the Pinecrest Motor Lodge, each drop adding to the stain spreading across the water-damaged ceiling. Elena Vasquez sat on the edge of a sagging mattress, watching her 17-year-old daughter Maya sleep under a pile of every blanket they owned. Even through the layers, Elena could see the curve of Maya's belly, 7 months along and growing bigger every day. Elena checked her phone. 4:47 in the morning. The construction site where she worked cleanup started at 6, which meant she had exactly 1 hour to shower, dress, and get Maya settled with enough food and water to last the day. The baby would be here in 2 months. They needed to be somewhere real by then. Somewhere with heat that worked and walls that didn't weep moisture. Somewhere that wasn't this 380-a-week room that was eating through her savings like acid. She'd had a house once, a real home in Pine Ridge with 3 bedrooms and a backyard where Maya used to play. That was before the medical bills from her mother's cancer treatment, before the layoff from the hospital where she'd worked as a medical assistant for 12 years, before Maya's boyfriend found out about the pregnancy and vanished like smoke, leaving Elena to catch her daughter as she fell apart. The eviction notice had come 4 months ago. Elena had begged for more time, offered payment plans, even considered bankruptcy. But math was math, and she owed more than she could ever pay. So she'd packed what fit in her 15-year-old Toyota, left the rest on the curb, and driven Maya to the Pinecrest, which had the distinction of being the cheapest weekly rate in Pine Ridge that wasn't actively condemned. Her phone buzzed, an email notification. Elena almost ignored it. Bill collectors had her email address, and she'd learned that opening those messages first thing in the morning was a good way to ruin a whole day. But something made her click. The subject line read, "Estate settlement. Urgent response required." Elena's heart stuttered. She opened it with shaking hands. The message was from a law office in Pine Ridge, Mitchell and Associates. It was short, formal, and completely unexpected. "Dear Ms. Vasquez, we are writing regarding the estate of Dolores Vasquez, deceased March the 2nd. You have been named sole beneficiary. The estate consists of one property, the Vasquez Marble Quarry, 22 acres located at Old Quarry Road, Pine Ridge. Please contact our office to arrange transfer of deed. Property taxes are in arrears. Immediate attention required. Sincerely, Robert Mitchell, attorney at law." Elena read it 3 times. Dolores Vasquez, her grandmother, the woman who disowned Elena's mother for marrying a man she deemed unworthy. The woman who'd refused to meet Elena even once, who'd returned every letter, every Christmas card, every attempt at reconciliation with cold silence. And now she was dead, and she'd left Elena a quarry. Elena knew about the quarry, of course. Everyone in Pine Ridge did. It had been the town's economic engine for 60 years, producing some of the finest marble in the region. Then, in 1987, a collapse had killed 3 workers and flooded the lower chambers. The operation had shut down overnight. Dolores had kept the property, paid the taxes, but never reopened it. It had sat there for 36 years, slowly crumbling, becoming one of those local legends about past glory and present decay. Elena called the number as soon as the law office opened at 8. She'd already dropped Maya off at the library where her daughter spent most days reading and trying to stay warm, and called in sick to work, losing a day's pay she couldn't afford. But this couldn't wait. Robert Mitchell was in his 60s with a voice that sounded like he'd seen every human failure and stopped being surprised decades ago. "Ms. Vasquez, thank you for calling. I assume you received my email about your grandmother's estate." "I did. I'm confused, though. My grandmother and I never spoke. Why would she leave me anything?" "I asked her that myself when she updated her will 6 months ago. She said, and I quote, 'Because Elena is the only one who won't sell it to the first developer who offers cash. She has her mother's stubbornness.'" End quote. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She hadn't heard anyone mention her mother in years, not since the funeral that Dolores hadn't attended. "What's the property worth?" Elena asked, trying to focus on practical matters. Mitchell sighed. "Honestly, maybe $850 as scrap value for the old equipment that's still there. The land itself is virtually worthless. The quarry is flooded, partially collapsed, and hasn't been profitable in decades. The county has declared it a hazard. You have 90 days to either secure it properly or pay for demolition. The estimate for demolition is about $45,000. Elena's stomach dropped. "I don't have $45,000. Most people don't. That's why these old industrial sites usually end up auctioned for pennies. I'd suggest you come in, sign the deed, and we can help you navigate the county requirements. There might be options." Elena drove to Old Quarry Road that afternoon, following directions on her phone down a rutted path that hadn't been maintained in decades. The quarry sat at the end of a valley, surrounded by pine forest and silence. What had once been an access road was now barely visible under encroaching vegetation. The main structure was a massive shed, its metal roof collapsed in several places. Rusted equipment sat scattered around like the bones of some industrial graveyard. Warning signs faded by sun, and weather lined a chain-link fence that had more holes than actual fence. But it was the quarry itself that drew Elena's attention. The pit was enormous, maybe 300 feet across, and at least 100 feet deep at its lowest visible point. The upper levels were dry, showing the distinctive layered cuts where marble had been extracted, but the lower half was filled with water, dark and still, reflecting the gray sky like a mirror. Elena found a gap in the fence and climbed through carefully. The ground near the edge was unstable, and she could see where chunks of it had calved off into the water below. She stood at the rim, looking down into the flooded depths, and felt the weight of impossibility settle on her shoulders. What was she supposed to do with this? She couldn't afford to secure it, couldn't afford to demolish it, couldn't afford the $850 to take ownership, let alone the taxes that would come due. This wasn't an inheritance. It was one more burden on a back already bent to breaking. Thinking about jumping, Elena spun around to find a man in his 50s watching her from near the old shed. He wore expensive outdoor gear and had the confident bearing of someone used to being listened to. "Just looking," Elena said carefully. "I'm Marcus Webb. I develop properties in Pine Ridge." He walked closer, his boots crunching on gravel. "I heard Dolores finally died. You must be the granddaughter." "Elena, and yes." Marcus looked down into the quarry with the assessing eye of someone calculating profit. "Hell of a thing leaving you this mess. Your grandmother was stubborn as they come. Had developers offering her money for years, but she always refused. Said the quarry was family legacy, meant something special." "Did you offer?" Elena asked. Marcus grinned. "Twice. She laughed me out of her house both times." He pulled out a business card and held it out.
If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this.
But you're more practical than she was, I'm betting. Here's my offer. I'll give you $5,000 cash for the property as is. That's more than generous considering what you're inheriting is basically a lawsuit waiting to happen. Elena took the card but didn't commit. $5,000 seems low for 22 acres. 22 acres of flooded quarry and environmental hazards. The cleanup alone would cost me 50 grand, and even then, I'm not sure what I could develop here. I'm offering $5,000 out of respect for your grandmother, and because I feel bad seeing someone in your situation get stuck with this. Her situation. Elena wondered how much he knew. Small towns were like that. Everyone knew everyone else's business. I need to think about it, she said. Marcus's smile thinned slightly. Sure, but don't think too long. County's going to come knocking about those safety violations soon. When they do, you'll wish you'd taken my offer. He left, and Elena stood alone at the edge of the flooded quarry. $5,000 would solve some immediate problems. It would get them out of the motel, pay for first and last month's rent on a small apartment, maybe leave enough for baby supplies. But something made her hesitate. Maybe it was her grandmother's voice in the will. Elena has her mother's stubbornness. Maybe it was the certainty that Marcus Webb wouldn't offer $5,000 for something truly worthless. Maybe it was just that she was tired of losing things, tired of taking whatever scraps people threw her way. Elena pulled out her phone and took pictures of everything. The quarry, the equipment, the old shed. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she'd learned that you couldn't make good decisions without information. That night, after Maya was asleep, Elena sat in the motel's parking lot using their McDonald's Wi-Fi and researched. She learned that the Vasquez quarry had produced premium Carrara-style marble, that its sudden closure had been controversial, that there had been rumors about the real reason for the shutdown. Some people claimed the collapse was deliberate, that Dolores had flooded the quarry herself to prevent something from being discovered. Elena found old newspaper articles about the 1987 incident. 3 workers dead, trapped when a section of the lower chamber collapsed. OSHA investigation, fines, shutdown. But buried in the articles were quotes from workers who survived, talking about the vein they'd been exploring when the collapse happened. A vein of marble unlike anything else in the quarry, with unusual coloring and patterns. They'd called it impossible marble, because the geological survey said it shouldn't exist in that location. Then the collapse, then the flooding, then silence. Elena looked at the photos on her phone, zooming in on the dark water filling the lower chambers. What had been down there? What had been important enough that her grandmother kept the property for 36 years, refusing every offer, waiting for someone who wouldn't sell? The next morning, Elena called in sick to work again. She couldn't afford to keep missing days, but she also couldn't afford to make the wrong decision about the quarry. She dropped Maya at the library with lunch money and drove back to Old Quarry Road. This time she'd come prepared. She'd bought a good flashlight at the dollar store, worn her oldest clothes, and brought a rope from her car's emergency kit. She was going to see exactly what she'd inherited before deciding whether to sell it. The chain-link fence had a padlocked gate, but the lock was so rusted it broke when Elena hit it with a rock. She made her way to the edge of the quarry and looked for a way down. The old access ramps had partially collapsed, but there were remnants of steps carved into the quarry wall, switchbacking down toward the water. Elena tested the first step. It held. She started down carefully, using the rope she'd tied to a piece of equipment as a safety line. The descent was treacherous, and twice she nearly slipped on loose stone, but she made it to the level just above the waterline without falling. Up close, the flooded section was even more intimidating. The water was absolutely still, black as ink, reflecting nothing. The smell was mineral and old, like the inside of a cave. Elena could see where the marble had been cut in precise horizontal layers, creating a stepped effect down into the depths. She walked along the water's edge, her flashlight picking out details. Old tool marks in the stone, rusted cables disappearing into the water, and there, partially submerged at the far end of the chamber, was something that made her stop. A structure, man-made, built into the quarry wall just below the waterline. It looked like a doorway or entrance blocked by a heavy metal gate that had been chained shut. The chains were corroded but still holding. Elena waded into the water. It was shockingly cold, stealing her breath, but she pushed forward until she reached the gate. Up close, she could see it was industrial-grade steel, the kind meant to keep things very secure or very contained. Through the bars, her flashlight beam revealed a tunnel leading back into the rock. She grabbed the chains and pulled. They were solid, immovable. She'd need tools to break through, heavy ones. But why was this here? What had been behind this gate that required flooding an entire quarry to protect? "Ms. Vasquez," a voice echoed across the quarry. "You need to come out of there now." Elena turned to see a man in a county uniform standing at the quarry rim, waving urgently. She waded back to the edge and climbed the rope to meet him. "This site is condemned," the inspector said, his face red with concern or anger. Elena couldn't tell which. "You could have been killed down there. Are you the new owner?" "Yes, Elena Vasquez." "Well, Ms. Vasquez, you've got 90 days to either secure this property or pay for professional demolition. What you were just doing, that's incredibly dangerous. The lower chambers are flooded for a reason. There was a major collapse in '87 that killed people." "I know the history. I just wanted to see what I'm dealing with." The inspector pulled out a tablet and started typing. "You're dealing with about $45,000 in demolition costs if you go that route. Or you can pay to have it properly secured, fencing, gates, monitoring. That's probably $15,000 to $20,000. Either way, you've got 3 months before we start issuing fines." He left, and Elena sat on the hood of her car, dripping quarry water and shaking from more than just cold. She had 3 months. 15,000 minimum, and something hidden behind a locked gate in a flooded chamber that her grandmother had protected for 36 years. That evening, Maya noticed Elena's distraction over their dinner of ramen and canned vegetables heated in the motel microwave. "Mom, what's wrong? Besides everything?" Elena smiled despite herself. Maya's dark humor had gotten sharper as the pregnancy progressed. "I'm just trying to figure out what to do about Grandmother Dolores's property." "The quarry. I thought you were selling it to that developer guy." "I'm thinking about it, but something doesn't add up. Why would he offer money for a flooded death trap? Why did Grandmother keep it all these years?" Maya shifted uncomfortably, one hand on her belly. "Maybe there's something valuable down there, like, I don't know, more marble or something? Maybe." Elena didn't mention the locked gate, the hidden tunnel. Maya had enough to worry about without her mother getting obsessed with conspiracy theories about a condemned quarry. But that night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about that gate, that tunnel, that impossible marble the workers had found right before the collapse. Finally, at 2 a.m., she got up and started searching online for anything about unusual marble, rare varieties, valuable stone. What she found made her sit up straight. There was a type of marble, incredibly rare, called lightning marble or dendritic marble. It formed when mineral veins, usually manganese or iron oxide, created branch-like patterns through the stone, resembling frozen lightning or trees. This marble was prized by collectors and high-end architects, sometimes selling for thousands of dollars per square foot. And it was geologically rare, occurring only under specific conditions that most quarries never encountered. Could that be what the workers had found? Could there be a vein of this rare marble hidden behind that gate? A vein worth enough that her grandmother had shut down an entire operation to protect it? Elena looked at Maya sleeping peacefully, one hand protectively over her belly. If there was even a chance that the quarry held something valuable, something that could give Maya and the baby a real future, then she had to find out. The next morning, Elena did something she'd never done before. She called her boss and quit. Not called in sick, not asked for time off. Quit. She had maybe $2,000 in savings left, 3 months until the county deadline, and a mystery locked behind a steel gate at the bottom of a flooded quarry. She was either about to discover something that would change their lives, or she was making the biggest mistake of her life. But as Maya liked to say, what did they have to lose? Elena spent the next 3 days at the library sitting near Maya, researching everything she could find about the Vasquez quarry, rare marble, and the 1987 collapse. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, who'd been kind to Maya throughout their motel months, noticed Elena's obsession. Looking into your grandmother's place? Mrs. Chen asked, setting down a faux stack of old newspapers. I thought you might want these. Local history archives. They're not digitized yet. Elena thanked her and dove into the yellowed pages. The articles about the collapse were sensational, as expected, but it was the pieces from before that caught her attention. Workers being interviewed about the quality of marble they were extracting. Mentions of Dolores Vasquez investing heavily in new drilling equipment despite the quarry already being profitable. Quotes from geologists who said the mineral composition in certain sections was anomalous and requiring further study. Then, 3 weeks before the collapse, the articles stopped mentioning the quarry at all, as if someone had put a blanket of silence over it. Elena found one final piece, a tiny paragraph on page 7 of the Pine Ridge Weekly from 2 weeks after the collapse. OSHA investigation into Vasquez quarry concludes with fines totaling $150,000. Owner Dolores Vasquez refused comment on rumors that workers had discovered an unusual mineral deposit prior to the incident. Quarry to remain closed indefinitely. Unusual mineral deposit, not just marble, something else. Mom! Maya appeared beside her, looking pale. I don't feel good. Elena's research evaporated instantly, replaced by pure maternal alarm. What's wrong? Is it the baby? Just dizzy and my back hurts. Can we go? They went to the emergency room. Elena's insurance had lapsed 2 months ago, but she didn't care. 3 hours and $800 she didn't have later. A tired doctor told them Maya was fine, the baby was fine, but she needed to be less stressed and better nourished. She's 17 and 7 months pregnant, the doctor said quietly to Elena in the hallway. Living in a motel. Not eating enough. Of course she's having issues. You need to get her somewhere stable. I'm working on it, Elena said, feeling the weight of inadequacy press down on her. That night, sitting in the motel room while Maya slept under orders to rest, Elena made a decision. She was going back to that quarry, and she was getting through that gate. Whatever was behind it, whatever her grandmother had protected, she needed to know if it could help them. She'd need equipment, bolt cutters at minimum, maybe a crowbar, and diving gear if she wanted to actually get through the gate without drowning herself. Elena had $1,847 in her bank account. She spent $230 at the hardware store on tools, another $80 on a wetsuit and underwater flashlight from a sporting goods store's clearance rack. Marcus Webb called her cell that afternoon. Ms. Vasquez, I wanted to check in. Have you thought about my offer? Still thinking, Elena said. I'll sweeten it. $7,000. That's my final offer, but it expires in 48 hours. After that, I'm moving on to other opportunities. $7,000 would solve so many problems. First month, last month, and deposit on an apartment. Furniture from thrift stores. Healthy food for Maya. Baby. Supplies, but it wouldn't be enough. Not really. $7,000 would buy them maybe 6 months before they were back in crisis mode, scrambling for rent, cutting meals, sliding back toward disaster. If there was something valuable in that quarry, if her grandmother had protected it for a reason, then 7,000 was probably a fraction of what it was worth. "I'll let you know," Elena said, and hung up before he could pressure her more. She went back to the quarry at dawn, when the light was just strong enough to see by, but early enough that she wouldn't be interrupted by county inspectors or curious developers. The wetsuit was uncomfortable and slightly too small, but it would keep her warm in the freezing water. Elena climbed down to the flooded chamber, her new bolt cutters heavy in a waterproof bag. The quarry was eerily silent at this hour, just the distant sound of birds and the whisper of wind through the pines. The water was as black and still as before, hiding everything beneath its surface. She waded in, gasping at the cold despite the wetsuit, and made her way to the gate. The chains were thick, but the bolt cutters were designed for heavy-duty work. It took 20 minutes of cutting, her arms screaming with effort, before the last chain fell away with a splash. Elena pulled the gate open. It moved more easily than she expected, swinging outward on hinges that had been built to last. Beyond was the tunnel, carved through solid marble, leading back into darkness. She turned on her underwater flashlight and entered. The tunnel was about 6 feet high and 4 feet wide, just big enough to walk through if she bent slightly. The walls were smooth, professionally cut, not a natural formation. Someone had carved this deliberately, mining their way toward something specific. Elena followed the tunnel for maybe 50 feet, the water getting deeper until she had to start swimming. Her flashlight beam cut through the murky water, revealing more carved walls, support beams, and then the tunnel opened into a chamber. Elena surfaced, gasping, and found herself in an underground space about the size of a small room. The water here was only waist deep, but it was what was above the waterline that made her forget to breathe. The walls were marble, but not like any marble Elena had ever seen. The stone was streaked with veins that looked like frozen lightning, dark, branch-like patterns that spread through the white and cream-colored base in intricate, beautiful networks. In her flashlight beam, the veins seemed to shimmer with an almost metallic sheen. This was it, the impossible marble, the vein that workers had found in 1987. Elena pulled herself up onto a ledge carved into the chamber wall and looked around properly. The veining extended in all directions, visible in every surface. Whoever had carved this chamber had done so, knowing they were revealing something extraordinary. And then she saw the crates. They were stacked against the far wall above the waterline, protected by tarps that had remarkably survived decades in the damp environment. Elena made her way across the chamber and pulled back the nearest tarp. Inside the crate were samples, core samples of the marble, each one carefully labeled and dated. 1986, 1987. Elena opened more crates and found testing equipment, documents sealed in waterproof cases, and a leather journal. The journal was Dolores's. Elena recognized her grandmother's handwriting from the few letters her mother had kept. She opened it to the first page. May 3rd, 1986. The geologist confirmed what I suspected. The vein we've found isn't just rare, it's potentially unique. Lightning marble of this quality and consistency has never been documented in North America. Conservative estimates suggest we're looking at 50,000 to 100,000 square feet of extractable stone. At current market rates for premium lightning marble, that's somewhere between $200 and $400 million. Elena had to read that number 3 times before it felt real. $200 to $400 million. Her hands shook as she turned pages, reading her grandmother's neat, precise notes about mineral composition, about consultations with experts, about her decision to keep the discovery completely secret. June 15th, 1986. I've decided not to report the vein. If word gets out, I'll be inundated with offers, pressure to sell, possibly even eminent domain claims. More importantly, rapid extraction would damage the vein. This marble needs to be mined slowly, carefully by people who understand its value. I'm prepared to wait. More entries followed, documenting Dolores's careful exploration of the vein, her planning for eventual extraction. And then, March 20th, 1987, Marcus Webb came to my house today with a delegation from Vision Corp Development. They offered $2 million for the quarry. When I refused, Webb made it clear they'd been doing their own geological surveys on adjacent properties. They know something valuable is here. Webb threatened to make things difficult if I don't sell. I've decided to accelerate my plans. March 29th, 1987. The collapse was successful. No one was supposed to be in the lower chambers during the controlled charges, but 3 workers ignored protocols. I'll carry that guilt forever. But the alternative, letting Webb and his corporate vultures plunder this vein for pennies on the dollar, would have been a different kind of crime. The marble is safe now, sealed behind a flooded barrier. I'll keep it that way until the right person inherits it, someone who'll protect it, not just exploit it. Elena sat in the dim chamber, her grandmother's journal heavy in her hands, and understood finally what she'd been left. Not a burden, a treasure. A treasure so valuable that Dolores had faked an accident and lived with 3 deaths on her conscience to protect it. A treasure that Marcus Webb had been trying to steal for 37 years. And now it belonged to Elena Vasquez, single mother, living in a motel with $1,600 to her name and 90 days to figure out what to do with $300 million worth of the world's rarest marble. She laughed. It came out slightly hysterical, echoing off the walls of the hidden chamber. Then she carefully packed the journal and several core samples into her waterproof bag and began the swim back to the surface. She had decisions to make, and this time she wasn't selling to Marcus Webb for pocket change. This time she was playing to win. Elena emerged from the quarry dripping and shaking, not from cold but from adrenaline. She'd swum through a flooded tunnel to find proof of a fortune. The kind of fortune that only existed in movies or the fever dreams of lottery ticket buyers. And it was real. She had the samples. She had her grandmother's journal. She had photographic evidence on her waterproof phone. She also had about 87 days before the county started fining her for not securing a hazardous property, less than $5,600 in her bank account, and a pregnant daughter who needed stability, not her mother chasing after buried treasure like some kind of delusional prospector. Elena drove back to the motel in a daze, her mind spinning with possibilities and problems in equal measure. Maya was awake when she arrived, sitting on the bed with her laptop, probably doing the online schoolwork she'd been completing to finish her diploma before the baby came. "Mom, you're soaked. Where were you?" Elena looked at her daughter, 17, pregnant, brave in ways that made Elena's heart hurt, and decided to trust her with the truth. "I need to show you something." She pulled out the marble samples, the core pieces that her grandmother had carefully labeled and stored. Even in the crappy lighting of the motel room, the lightning patterns were stunning, dark veins branching through the pale stone like frozen electricity. This is from the quarry, from a hidden chamber that Grandmother Dolores sealed off 36 years ago. Maya picked up one of the samples, turning it to catch the light. "It's beautiful. What is it?" "Lightning marble, one of the rarest varieties in the world. According to Grandmother's journal, there's potentially 100,000 square feet of it down there. Maybe more." "How much is it worth?" Elena took a breath. "Hundreds of millions of dollars." The number hung between them like something too large to fit in the shabby motel room. Maya set down the sample carefully as if it might explode. Are you sure, like actually sure, or is this one of those things where it seems valuable but actually isn't? I'm not completely sure. I need to get it authenticated by experts. But grandmother seemed certain, and she knew the stone business her whole life. Maya was quiet for a long moment, her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. What are we going to do? I don't know yet, but I know we can't sell to Marcus Webb for $7,000, and I know we need to be careful, really careful. That night, Elena read through more of Dolores's journal while Maya slept. Her grandmother had documented everything, the geological surveys, the market research, the threats from Webb and Vision Corp development. But she'd also written something else, entries that were more personal, more raw. July 4th, 1990, 3 years since I sealed the chamber. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. 3 men died because of my actions. I live with that every day. But then I see what Webb is doing to other properties in Pine Ridge. Strip mining, environmental damage, communities destroyed for quarterly profits. And I know the marble is safer hidden than in his hands. Someday when I'm gone, someone in the family will inherit this. Someone who'll understand what it means to protect something rather than just profit from it. I hope it's Elena's child. I hope she's as strong as her mother was. God knows she'll need to be. Elena wiped tears from her eyes. Her grandmother had been watching from a distance, had known about Elena's struggles, had chosen her specifically for this burden and blessing. She pulled out the business card Marcus Webb had given her and looked at his number. Then she made a decision. She called him at 7 a.m. Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb, this is Elena Vasquez. I'm ready to discuss your offer for the quarry. Excellent decision, Ms. Vasquez. When can we meet? How about today, at the quarry? I want to walk you through what you'd be getting. There was a pause, and Elena could almost hear Webb's suspicion. The county says it's not safe. I've been down there. I know where the stable areas are. If you want the property, you should at least see it up close. Otherwise, how do you know $7,000 is a fair price? Webb laughed. Fair point. I'll be there at 10 a.m. Elena hung up and immediately called Robert Mitchell, the lawyer who'd handled her grandmother's estate. Mr. Mitchell, I need legal advice, and I need you to keep it completely confidential. That's what attorney-client privilege is for, Ms. Vasquez. What's the situation? Elena told him everything. The hidden chamber, the marble samples, the journal, Webb's decades of pursuit. When she finished, Mitchell was silent for a long moment. Ms. Vasquez, if what you're saying is accurate, you're sitting on a fortune that a very determined man has been trying to acquire for nearly 40 years. You need to be extraordinarily careful about your next moves. That's why I'm calling you. What should I do? First, don't meet with Webb alone. I'll be there at 9:30. Second, we need to get those samples authenticated by a reputable independent geological firm, not anyone local who might have connections to Webb. Third, we need to secure your rights to the mineral deposits explicitly. Make sure your deed includes subsurface rights. And fourth, you need to move out of that motel today. I can't afford. Yes, you can. You can take a loan against the property's potential value. I know a private lender who specializes in mineral rights financing. The samples and journal will be enough to secure a bridge loan for immediate expenses. You need to establish residency on the property or somewhere more secure before Webb figures out what you found. Elena felt something loosen in her chest, an actual plan, steps she could take. Can you really do all that? Ms. Vasquez, your grandmother was one of the shrewdest businesswomen I ever met. She planned for this. She left you the property free and clear, with documentation that will stand up in court. Now we need to protect that inheritance and make sure you come out of this with what you're owed. What do I owe you? I can't pay your normal rates. Let's say 5% of whatever the property generates. If it's worth what you think it is, that'll be fair compensation for everyone. If it turns out to be nothing, then you don't owe me anything. Deal. Deal. Elena spent the next 2 hours getting ready. She called Maya's doctor and had her file transferred to the clinic in town. She packed their belongings. It didn't take long. They didn't have much. And she prepared for the meeting with Webb by reading more of her grandmother's journal, learning how Dolores had handled him over the years. The key seemed to be revealing nothing while learning everything. Robert Mitchell arrived at the quarry at 9:30 as promised, driving a practical sedan and carrying a briefcase that looked like it had survived multiple decades of legal battles. "Show me," he said simply. Elena led him down to the flooded chamber, though they didn't enter the water. Just seeing the gate, seeing the tunnel entrance, was enough. Mitchell took photos, made notes, asked precise questions about what she'd found beyond. "We'll need to get a professional diving team in here to properly document everything," he said. "And we'll need to do it fast before Webb figures out what's going on. But this is real, Ms. Vasquez. Your grandmother really did it. She hid a fortune in plain sight." Webb arrived at 10:05, driving an expensive SUV and wearing clothes that cost more than Elena's monthly motel bill. He brought a companion, a younger man who Mitchell whispered was a Vision Corp vice president. "Ms. Vasquez," Webb said, shaking her hand with practiced firmness. "And Robert Mitchell, I'm surprised to see you here." "Ms. Vasquez has retained my services to handle the property transfer," Mitchell said smoothly. Given the complexity of the situation, legal representation seemed prudent. Webb's smile tightened slightly. "Of course. Well then, shall we see what we're dealing with?" Elena led them around the quarry's rim, pointing out the various levels, the old equipment, the flooded sections. She played the part of someone overwhelmed by the inheritance, asking questions about what Webb would do with the property, how quickly he could close. "I could have papers drawn up by tomorrow," Webb said. "Cash payment, no inspection contingencies. You'd be free of this burden by the end of the week." "That's very generous," Elena said. "But I'm curious. Why do you want it so badly? It's been sitting here unusable for decades." Webb's companion jumped in. "Vision Corp specializes in environmental remediation and property redevelopment. We see potential where others see problems." "What kind of potential? Housing development, commercial?" "We'd need to complete surveys before making final plans," Webb said, back in control. "But yes, potentially housing. Pine Ridge is growing. Good land is getting scarce." Elena nodded, pretending to consider this. "Mr. Mitchell, what do you think? Is 7,000 fair?" Mitchell made a show of consulting his notes. "Well, Ms. Vasquez, that depends on several factors. The mineral rights, for instance. Those are quite valuable in some cases." Webb's expression flickered for just an instant. Fear, anger. It was gone too quickly to read. "The mineral rights are included in my offer," Webb said. "Everything, as is." "That's very thorough," Mitchell said. "Of course, Ms. Vasquez would want to know the appraised value of those rights before selling. Standard practice." "The marble operation shut down in '87, Webb countered. "There's no active mineral value here." "Then having them appraised shouldn't be a problem," Mitchell said pleasantly. "In fact, why don't we do this properly? Get a full geological survey, updated appraisal, environmental assessment. Then Ms. Vasquez can make an informed decision about whether 7,000 or any amount is appropriate." Webb's jaw tightened. "That could take months. The county's deadline can be extended while we conduct due diligence," Mitchell finished. "I'll file the necessary paperwork this afternoon. Ms. Vasquez, I'd advise against making any hasty decisions about this property until we have complete information about what you own." Elena watched Webb struggle with his frustration. He'd been so close. 7,000 for a property worth hundreds of millions. And now a competent lawyer was gumming up his plan. "Mr. Webb, I appreciate your offer," Elena said, "but Mr. Mitchell is right. I should know what I have before I sell it. I hope you understand." Webb's smile was predatory now, all pretense of friendliness gone. "Of course, take your time. But Ms. Vasquez, a word of advice. Sometimes opportunity has a short shelf life. The county inspections alone could end up costing you more than I'm offering. Just something to think about." They left, the SUV kicking up dust as it sped down the rutted road. "You handled that well," Mitchell said. "He's rattled." "What happens now?" "Now we move fast. I've got a geological firm out of Denver that owes me a favor. They'll be here Monday to do a preliminary assessment. We'll also need to file an injunction against any development or mining operations within a 2-mile radius, just in case Webb tries to tunnel in from, adjacent properties, and you need to establish legal residency either on the property or somewhere that isn't a motel. The property doesn't have a house, just that collapsed shed. Then we'll put you in an apartment until we can build something on the land. I've arranged for a $50,000 bridge loan against the property's value. It'll be wired to your account by end of business today." Elena stared at him. $50,000. I've never had that much money in my life. You're about to have considerably more if the geological survey confirms what we suspect. But Ms. Vasquez, you need to prepare yourself for what comes next. When word gets out about the marble, and it will get out, you're going to face pressure you can't imagine. Offers, threats, legal challenges. Webb has been pursuing this for 37 years. He's not going to give up just because you hired a lawyer. Elena thought about Maya, 7 months pregnant, trusting her mother to keep them safe. She thought about her grandmother, living with the guilt of 3 deaths for decades, because she believed protecting the marble was more important than personal comfort. "I'm not giving up either," Elena said. "This is mine. Grandmother left it to me because she trusted me to protect it. I'm not letting Marcus Webb or anyone else take that away." Mitchell nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Then let's get to work." The geological team arrived on Monday morning with equipment that looked like it belonged on a Mars rover. Elena had moved Maya into a small 2-bedroom apartment in Pine Ridge using the bridge loan, bought a week's worth of groceries and paid the first month's rent with enough left over to buy Maya some actual maternity clothes that fit. The apartment was nothing fancy, but it had heat that worked, a kitchen with a real stove and windows that didn't leak. Maya had cried when she first walked in, not from sadness but from relief. They'd have their own place when the baby came. A home. Dr. Patricia Chen from Denver Geological Survey was in her 50s, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent more time underground than in boardrooms. She listened to Elena's explanation of the chamber, examined the core samples, and read relevant sections of Dolores's journal. "Lightning marble of this quality is extraordinarily rare," she said finally. "If the vein is as extensive as these notes suggest, you're looking at something genuinely unique. But I need to see it in person. The water's going to make that complicated." "I can take you to the chamber," Elena offered. "I've been through twice already." "Not alone, you won't. We'll need proper diving equipment, safety protocols, documentation. Give me 24 hours to set up. We'll do this right." That evening, while Dr. Chen's team prepared their equipment, Elena received a visitor at the apartment. A woman in her 60s, elegantly dressed, with the bearing of old money and older secrets. "Ms. Vasquez, my name is Catherine Rosenberg. I was a friend of your grandmother's." Elena invited her in, curious. Maya was at a prenatal checkup with a friend from her online school program, so they had privacy. "I heard you've retained Robert Mitchell. Catherine said, accepting tea. Smart move. Your grandmother trusted him completely. You knew about the marble. Dolores told me everything. I was one of the few she trusted with the whole story. She felt terrible about those 3 men who died, but she also believed she'd made the only choice available to her. Marcus Webb would have destroyed that marble, extracted it carelessly, sold it for a fraction of its value. Your grandmother understood that sometimes protecting something valuable means making hard choices. Why are you telling me this? Catherine set down her tea carefully. Because Webb is about to make his move. He knows you've brought in geologists. He knows you're not selling, and he's desperate. The Vision Corp development he represents is leveraged heavily on the assumption that they'll acquire this property. If he fails, he's going to face some very angry investors. What kind of move? Legal challenges to your grandmother's will. Eminent domain claims through friendly county officials. Maybe worse. Webb has deep pockets and no ethics. You need to be prepared. How do I prepare for that? Catherine smiled. You already have. You hired Mitchell. You brought in independent experts. You moved out of that motel where you were vulnerable. Now you need to do one more thing. Document everything. Every threat, every pressure, every shady move Webb makes. Build a case. Because when this goes public, and it will, you want the narrative to be about a grandmother protecting a treasure and passing it to her granddaughter, not about some greedy woman stealing what belongs to the community. Elena felt cold. Is that what he'll say? That's exactly what he'll say. He'll paint your grandmother as a hoarder who shut down a profitable operation and killed 3 workers to hide her personal fortune. He'll paint you as an opportunist trying to cash in on tragedy. The only way to counter that is with the truth, documented and undeniable. After Catherine left, Elena spent hours going through her grandmother's journal, photographing every page, every entry, every piece of evidence that showed Dolores's real motivations. She uploaded everything to a secure cloud server, sent copies to Mitchell, and created a timeline of Webb's harassment, spanning nearly 4 decades. By midnight, she had a complete archive, proof of exactly what her grandmother had protected and why. The next morning, Dr. Chen's team began their underwater survey of the chamber. Elena wasn't allowed in the water. Safety protocols, Dr. Chen explained, but she watched from the quarry rim as the professional divers disappeared into the flooded tunnel. They were down there for 3 hours. When Dr. Chen finally surfaced and climbed back to the rim, her expression was carefully neutral. She gestured for Elena and Mitchell to follow her to the mobile lab her team had set up. Inside, spread across examination tables, were dozens of new core samples along with high-resolution underwater photos of the chamber walls. Ms. Vasquez, Dr. Chen said, pulling up images on a laptop. Your grandmother's estimates were conservative. She brought up a 3D model constructed from sonar mapping. The visible vein you found is actually just the tip of a much larger deposit. Our scans suggest the lightning marble formation extends at least 200 feet in 3 directions from that chamber. At current extraction and market rates, we're looking at approximately $378 million worth of premium lightning marble. The number hit Elena like a physical force. Not $200 million, not $300 million, $178 million. Are you certain? Mitchell asked, his voice carefully controlled. As certain as I can be without full extraction and assessment. But based on these samples, the consistent quality, the extent of the formation, yes. This is one of the most significant lightning marble deposits ever documented in North America, possibly the world. Elena sat down before her legs gave out. $378 million. That was generational wealth. That was never worry about money again wealth. That was change Maya's entire future wealth. What do we do now? She asked. Now, Mitchell said, we move very quickly before Webb's team figures out what we've confirmed. Dr. Chen, how fast can you have a complete report prepared? 48 hours if I prioritize this. Do it. Elena, I need you to sign some documents tonight. We're going to establish a private trust to hold the mineral rights, separate from your personal assets. That'll protect you from direct legal attacks. And we need to start talking to potential buyers, legitimate ones, not predators like Webb. Buyers? Elena felt possessive suddenly. I thought we'd mine it ourselves. With what capital? Proper extraction of this marble will require millions in equipment, permits, environmental reviews, skilled labor. You don't have that kind of money yet. Better to negotiate a royalty deal with an established extraction company. You keep ownership of the land. They pay you a percentage of whatever they extract. That way you get steady income and they take on the operational risk. It made sense, but Elena still felt reluctant to let anyone else touch the marble her grandmother had protected so fiercely. Let me think about it, she said. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept going over numbers in her head. $378 million. Even if she only got a fraction of that through royalties, even if the extraction took years, it was more money than she could conceptualize. Maya would have everything. College, health care. The baby would grow up without ever knowing poverty. Elena would never have to serve coffee to men like Jim Garrett, never have to smile through wandering hands and bad tips, never have to watch her daughter wear shoes held together with duct tape. But there was something else, something her grandmother had written in the journal about responsibility, about being a steward rather than just an owner. Dolores had kept the marble safe not just for profit, but because she believed it was important, valuable beyond its monetary worth. What would Elena do with her fortune? How would she use it? At 2 a.m. she got up and started making a different kind of list, not of expenses, but of possibilities. A foundation for single mothers in crisis, funding for Maya's school to expand their support for pregnant teens, investment in Pine Ridge's dying downtown, bringing back the economic vitality that had disappeared when the quarry closed. She could do all of that and still have more money than she'd need for 10 lifetimes. The thought was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. The next day, Marcus Webb made his move. Elena was at the quarry meeting with an extraction company representative when 3 county vehicles pulled up, followed by Webb's SUV. A man in an ill-fitting suit climbed out, holding official-looking papers. Elena Vasquez, I'm Dale Pritchard, County Assessor. I have a court order requiring you to cease all activity on this property immediately pending a county review of mineral rights ownership. Mitchell appeared from nowhere. Elena suspected he'd been anticipating this. On what grounds? Pritchard handed over the papers. On the grounds that Dolores Vasquez's mineral rights claim may have been improperly filed in 1962. We're conducting a review to determine legitimate ownership before any extraction can proceed. This is a stall tactic, Mitchell said, scanning the documents. The mineral rights were properly filed and have been maintained for 62 years. This review is nothing but harassment. Webb stepped forward, his expression professionally concerned. No one's harassing anyone, Robert. We're just making sure everything is legal and proper. I'm sure Ms. Vasquez wants that too, unless she has something to hide. The only thing being hidden here is your obvious conflict of interest, Mitchell shot back. You've been trying to steal this property for nearly 40 years. Now that Ms. Vasquez knows what it's worth, you're using county officials to do your dirty work. That's a serious accusation. It's a true accusation, and I'll be filing a complaint with the State Attorney General by end of business today. Pritchard looked uncomfortable. Look, I'm just following orders. The review will take maybe 2 weeks. Then, if everything checks out, Ms. Vasquez can proceed. 2 weeks during which the geological team has to leave? The extraction company loses interest, and somehow Marcus Webb swoops in with a friendly offer to resolve everything, Mitchell said. We've seen this playbook before. Mr. Mitchell, I don't appreciate the implication that I'm corrupt. Then prove you're not. Recuse yourself from this review and request a state-level auditor to handle it. Pritchard hesitated, and Elena saw the calculation in his eyes. Whatever Webb had promised him, it apparently wasn't worth getting investigated by the state. Fine, I'll request state oversight, but the work stoppage stands until then. After they left, the extraction company representative, a woman named Amanda Torres, who'd been watching the whole scene with interest, turned to Elena. That was educational, but Ms. Vasquez, I'll be frank, my company can't wait 2 weeks while you fight legal battles with local developers. We have other projects, other opportunities. If you can't give us a clear timeline for when we can begin assessment and extraction, we'll have to move on. Elena felt panic rise. How long can you give me? 1 week. If you don't have clear legal ownership and mineral rights confirmed by next Friday, we're out. After Amanda left, Elena turned to Mitchell. Can we win this in a week? Maybe. If we get the state involved immediately, if they fast-track the review, if Webb doesn't throw up any more roadblocks. And if we can't? Mitchell looked at her seriously. Then we find another extraction company. Or we wait until the legal issues are fully resolved, which could take months or years. Meanwhile, you're paying property taxes on land valued at nearly $400 million, which is going to be substantial. And Webb will keep attacking, keep filing challenges, keep trying to bleed you dry until you give up and sell to him for pennies on the dollar. That's what he's counting on, that I'll get tired and desperate and take whatever he offers. Yes. Elena thought about her grandmother, keeping this secret for 36 years despite pressure, despite threats, despite the weight of 3 deaths on her conscience. Dolores hadn't given up. She'd protected the marble until she could find someone strong enough to continue that protection. Then we don't give him the satisfaction, Elena said. File your complaint with the Attorney General. Get the state review started, and let's find a backup extraction company in case Amanda's company walks. I'm not selling to Marcus Webb, not for 7,000, not for 7 million, not ever. Mitchell smiled. Your grandmother would be proud. The state review began 3 days later, conducted by an auditor named Sarah Kim, who had a reputation for being thorough and incorruptible. She spent 2 full days at the county record office, examining every filing related to the Vasquez Quarry from 1962 forward. On day 3, she requested a meeting with Elena, Mitchell, and Marcus Webb at the quarry site. They all arrived separately, Webb with his lawyers, Elena with Mitchell, and Sarah Kim in a practical government sedan. She stood at the quarry rim with a thick file folder and an expression that revealed nothing. I've completed my review of the mineral rights claims, she said. The history is complex, but the conclusion is straightforward. Dolores Vasquez properly filed and maintained mineral rights to this property beginning in 1962. Those rights transferred to Ms. Elena Vasquez upon Dolores's death through a valid will. There are no gaps, no improper filings, no legitimate challenges to ownership. Webb's face went dark red. That can't be right. We have evidence. You have speculation and wishful thinking, Kim interrupted. The documentation is ironclad. Ms. Vasquez owns this property and all mineral rights associated with it, free and clear. She handed Elena an official certificate. This confirms state validation of your ownership. No further reviews are necessary unless substantial new evidence emerges, which I doubt. Webb turned to his lawyers, who were already packing up, clearly done with a losing battle. This isn't over, he said to Elena. You have no idea what you're dealing with. That marble should belong to someone who knows how to properly develop it. "It belongs to me," Elena said quietly, "and I'll develop it exactly how my grandmother wanted, carefully, sustainably, and on my own terms." Webb left without another word, his SUV spraying gravel as it accelerated down the access road. Elena stood at the quarry rim, holding the state certificate, and felt something shift inside her. For the first time since inheriting the property, she wasn't reacting to emergencies or fighting off attacks. She was in control. "What happens next?" she asked Mitchell. "Next, we negotiate the best deal possible for extraction rights. Amanda Torres's company is still interested. I got an email this morning confirming they'll move forward now that ownership is clear. We should be able to start operations within 6 months." 6 months. Half a year until her life completely changed. Until Maya and the baby had security. Until Elena could stop worrying about rent and bills and whether they'd have enough food. But first, there was something she needed to do. That evening, Elena returned to the hidden chamber alone. She'd become practiced at the swim now, comfortable in the dark water, confident in her movements. She surfaced in the marble-walled space and pulled herself up onto the ledge where her grandmother's crates still sat. She opened the journal one more time, reading the final entry. January 15th, 2025. "I'm dying. Cancer, the doctors say. I have maybe 6 months. I've updated my will to leave everything to Elena. She doesn't know me, probably hates me for abandoning her family, but I've been watching her from a distance. She's strong like her mother was, and she's struggling in ways that break my heart. The marble can save her if she's brave enough to fight for it. I hope she is. I hope she forgives me for the burden I'm giving her, and I hope she understands that true wealth isn't what you have. It's what you protect and who you protect it for." Dolores Vasquez. Elena closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. Her grandmother had known, had watched Elena losing her house, struggling in the motel, doing everything she could to keep Maya safe. And Dolores had given her this one chance to build something different. "I understand," Elena whispered to the silent chamber, "and I won't let you down." What happens next will turn this story upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. The extraction began in September, just as Maya's pregnancy entered its final weeks. Elena had negotiated a deal that gave her 35% royalties on all marble extracted, an unprecedented rate that Amanda Torres had called highway robbery before signing the contract anyway. The lightning marble was simply too valuable to pass up. Pine Ridge Marble Extraction Company, the official name of the operation, brought in specialists from Italy who'd worked with rare marble varieties for decades. They set up operations with a level of care and environmental consciousness that made Elena understand why Amanda's company had the reputation it did. This wasn't strip mining, this was art. The baby came on October 3rd, a girl, 7 pounds, with Maya's dark hair and a cry that announced she'd inherited her mother's and grandmother's stubborn streak. They named her Dolores after the great-grandmother who'd never met Maya, but had saved them both. Elena held her granddaughter in the hospital room, looking at Maya, who'd handled 16 hours of labor with the same quiet strength she'd shown through everything else, and felt something settle in her chest. They'd made it. Against every odd, despite every obstacle, they'd survived. The first royalty check arrived when baby Dolores was 2 weeks old. 2.3 million. Elena stared at the number until it stopped looking like a figure and started looking like possibility. She paid off Maya's medical bills, bought a house, a real house with a yard and a nursery, and a kitchen big enough to cook actual meals. She set up trust funds for Maya and baby Dolores that would ensure neither of them ever faced the kind of poverty Elena had known. And then she started thinking bigger. The foundation launched in January, 6 months after the marble discovery became public knowledge. The Vasquez Foundation for Single-Parent Support provided emergency housing, job training, child care assistance, and legal aid to families in crisis across Montana and beyond. The first family they helped was living out of a car in Billings, a mother with 3 kids who'd lost everything after medical bankruptcy. Elena met with her personally, saw her own desperate face reflected back, and wrote a check that covered 6 months of rent, furniture, and a security deposit. "Why are you doing this?" the woman asked, tears streaming down her face. "Because someone did it for me," Elena said. "In her own way, my grandmother gave me a chance. Now I'm passing it forward." By the end of the first year, the foundation had helped 127 families. Each one came with a story of struggle, job loss, medical crisis, domestic violence, simple bad luck. Elena read every application personally, approved most of them, and occasionally showed up in person to help families move into their new homes. Pine Ridge transformed too. The marble operation brought jobs, good ones, with benefits and fair wages. Elena had insisted on that in her contract with Amanda's company. Local workers got first priority for hiring. Environmental protections were written directly into the extraction plans, and 10% of all royalties went into a community fund that revitalized Pine Ridge's dying downtown. The old diner where Elena used to work got renovated. The hardware store expanded. New businesses opened. For the first time in decades, young people weren't leaving Pine Ridge for opportunities elsewhere. They were staying, building lives, creating a future. Marcus Webb tried one more legal challenge, claiming that the extraction operation violated environmental regulations. It went nowhere. His development company, Vision Corp., collapsed 6 months later under the weight of debt taken on in anticipation of acquiring the quarry. Webb left town quietly, his reputation destroyed. Elena felt no satisfaction in his downfall. She was too busy building something better. 2 years after finding the chamber, Elena stood at the quarry rim with Maya, who was juggling toddler Dolores while trying to take photos of the operation below. The marble being extracted was spectacular, each piece unique, the lightning patterns creating natural art that would grace museums and luxury buildings around the world. "Do you ever regret it?" Maya asked. "Not selling? Marcus Webb offered $7 million at one point. That would have been a lot easier." Elena thought about the 300-plus families the foundation had helped, the jobs created in Pine Ridge, the way the town had come back to life, the scholarship fund she'd established at Maya's high school for pregnant teens who wanted to finish their education, the way baby Dolores would grow up never knowing poverty, never watching her mother struggle. "No," Elena said. "Grandmother was right. True wealth isn't what you have. It's what you protect and who you protect it for." A text came through on Elena's phone. Another application to the foundation, this one from a woman in Missoula living in a motel with her 2 kids, cleaning houses for cash. Elena approved it immediately and forwarded the case to her foundation director. "Mom," Maya said, watching her, "you can't save everyone." "No," Elena agreed, "but I can save some. That's enough." That evening they had dinner at the house, Elena, Maya, and baby Dolores, along with Robert Mitchell and his wife, Catherine Rosenberg, who'd become a close friend and advisor, and Amanda Torres, who'd driven up from Denver to discuss expansion of the extraction operation. The table was full of laughter and conversation, the smell of home-cooked food filling the kitchen, baby Dolores making happy noises in her high chair. This was wealth, Elena thought, not the money in the bank or the marble in the ground. This, family, community, purpose. After dinner, Elena went down to her study, a room she'd dedicated to managing the foundation and the quarry operations. On the wall was a photo of Dolores Vasquez from the 1960s, standing at the quarry rim, looking determined and uncompromising. Beside it was a photo Elena had taken last month, herself, Maya, and baby Dolores at the same spot. 3 generations of Vasquez women, each one having survived their own struggles, each one stronger for it. "Thank you," Elena said quietly to her grandmother's photo, "for trusting me, for giving me the chance to finish what you started." She'd thought the marble was the inheritance, but she'd been wrong. The real inheritance was responsibility, the understanding that having resources meant using them to lift others up, that wealth carried obligations, that the greatest legacy wasn't what you accumulated, but what you gave away. Dolores had protected the marble for 36 years, waiting for someone who would understand that. Elena had become that person, forged by struggle into someone who knew the value of refuge, of second chances, of hope when everything seemed lost. The marble would last for decades, maybe longer. The royalties would continue flowing, funding the foundation, supporting the community, ensuring that no family in Pine Ridge would ever face the kind of desperation Elena had known. And someday, when baby Dolores was old enough to understand, Elena would tell her the whole story, about the collapsed quarry and the hidden chamber, about Marcus Webb's decades of pressure and Dolores's fierce protection, about the choice Elena had made to use the fortune for more than just personal comfort. She'd tell her granddaughter that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in lives changed, in families saved, in communities rebuilt. That sometimes the most valuable thing you can inherit isn't money, it's the understanding of how to use it wisely. Baby Dolores would inherit the foundation someday, along with whatever remained of the marble operations, and Elena would make sure she understood what came with that inheritance, not just privilege, but purpose, not just resources, but responsibility. The Vasquez legacy wouldn't be about marble or money. It would be about protection, about refuge, about standing firm against pressure to take the easy path. It would be about 3 generations of women who'd faced impossible odds and refused to break. That was the inheritance. That was the treasure. And it was worth more than all the marble in the world. 5 years after the discovery, on a warm spring afternoon, Elena attended the dedication ceremony for the Vasquez Community Center, a beautiful building in downtown Pine Ridge that housed the Foundation's offices, a job training center, childcare facilities, and a museum documenting the history of the quarry and Dolores's remarkable life. The mayor, who'd replaced the old one after Webb's corruption came to light, gave a speech about Elena's generosity and vision. Catherine Rosenberg spoke about Dolores's courage during the war years and afterward. Local families shared testimonials about how the foundation had changed their lives. But it was Maya who gave the speech that mattered most. She stood at the podium, confident now in ways that 17-year-old Maya living in a motel had never been. "My mom likes to say that Grandmother Dolores gave us the marble," Maya said. "But that's not quite right. What she really gave us was a choice. She gave my mom the choice to do something different, to be something different, to build something that would last longer than any of us." Maya looked directly at Elena. "My mom made the right choice. She chose purpose over profit, community over comfort. She chose to be the kind of person who, when given a fortune, asked, 'How can I help?' instead of, 'How much can I keep?' That's the real inheritance, not the marble, not the money, but the example." Baby Dolores, now a precocious 5-year-old, tugged on Elena's hand. "Grandma, are you crying?" Elena wiped her eyes and smiled. "Happy tears, baby, just happy tears." After the ceremony, Elena walked back to the quarry one more time, The extraction operation continued, but at a sustainable pace, taking only what the stone could give without destroying what remained. The chamber where she'd first discovered the lightning marble was preserved as part of the geological survey, a testament to what lay hidden beneath the surface if you were brave enough to look. She stood at the rim where she'd stood years ago as a desperate woman with nowhere left to turn, and looked down at the work happening below. Italian craftsmen carefully extracted slabs of marble that would become floors in museums, walls in embassies, monuments that would last centuries. Her grandmother's vision, preserved and extended, a legacy of protection turned into a legacy of provision. Elena's phone rang, the foundation director calling about a new application, a family of 6 displaced by a house fire, living in their van, struggling. Could the foundation help? Yes, Elena said, as she always did. Help them today, whatever they need. Because that was the answer. That was always the answer. When you'd been broken and rebuilt, when you'd faced the abyss and survived, when someone had given you a rope just as you were slipping under, you learned that the only worthy response to fortune was generosity. The marble had made her rich, but compassion had made her wealthy. And that distinction, Elena had learned, made all the difference in the world. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.